it's the luxury boxes
Yeah.
we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
All right, welcome back. For the break, we were talking about receptacles, electrical receptacles primarily. And when you all inspect houses, do y'all inspect each and every receptacle?
As many as we can get to. I mean, we're not going to move a china cabinet or break dishes or anything.
And you check for tension, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, we have a little thing that it tells like what it's pulling, that sort of thing.
I've been around electrical all my life. My father was an electrician. I've always been intrigued by electrical. It's just been something that just as a kid, I was always fascinated.
I remember the first time I met you, said, "Do you know who Nikola Tesla is?" I said,
Nikola Tesla.
I do know.
Tesla, however you want to say it. Anyway, electrical component of your house. I mean, electrical is one of the. I mean, it's your infrastructure. I mean, you don't do much in this world without electricity, right?
Correct.
Now, you've got receptacles in your house. You've got, I'm going to help me out as we move forward here, but you've got, typically most homes, residential homes out there, have two different amp circuits. And with each amp circuit, you have different gauge wires.
Correct.
And with different gauge wires, and you have 14 gauge that typically handle 15 amp circuits.
Right.
Matter of fact, the code dictates if it's a 14 gauge wire, it's going to be a 15 amp circuit.
Right.
You don't run 20 amp circuits off 14 gauge wire.
Yeah,
You step up to 12 gauge. So you got 12 gauge wire, you got 14 gauge wire. You got a 15 amp circuit, you got a 20 amp circuit, right? All kitchen circuits in today's world are 20 amp circuits.
Bathrooms.
And bathrooms, exactly. They're 20 amp circuits, so they're using 12 gauge wire.
Right.
Well, when you go to the store, big box store, electrical warehouse, whatever, and if there's any electricians out there that want to correct me with anything, please do. It's quite all right with me. But when you go buy an electrical device, a receptacle, that receptacle's rated 15 or 20 amp. Now, you can go to the big box store and buy a receptacle, white, ivory, black, whatever color, for 47 cents. That is a 15 amp cheap receptacle.
Right.
Cheap. Did I say it was cheap? I meant it was cheap. Okay, now, why is it cheap? Because they make them in bulk in China.
Correct.
Okay, they're 15 amp. Now, if you step up, you're going to pay 47 cents for that. Or you can buy a 10-pack for $2.50 some odd cents or whatever.
Right,
okay?
right.
Okay, and do electricians buy them? Oh, God, off the shelf. Yeah. Do they work? Yeah. Now, how does all this work, or where am I going with all this? I've been doing remodeling now 50 years. I have seen about every problem you can see with electrical, from fried, toasted, burnt, black receptacles through the years on aluminum wire, to dryer receptacles. Now, this is something you probably don't check often, and most people don't. Dryer receptacles, clothes dryers. That's a 30 amp circuit, number 10 wire typically. See, the more amps, the bigger the wire.
It's like shotguns.
Exactly.
The shorter,
right.
The smaller the gauge, the bigger.
So a lot of dryer receptacles out there, if you pulled them out and looked at the prongs, would be burnt. Believe it or not, because there's tension. When you plug something in to a receptacle in the wall, that little outlet,
right.
When you plug something in, there's tension. There's brass plates in there that receive those two prongs. And they've got a certain amount of spring tension to them.
Well, is it kind of the same thing like when you're, like you jump a car off and,
exactly.
You connect the last wire, and you can tell as soon as you get close to it, it's starting to spark. There's tension right there. Is that the
same thing? Yeah. And if you plug it in, you've got to have solid contact.
Right.
If you don't have solid, good contact, you have resistance.
Sparks. And
anytime you have resistance, you have heat.
Yeah, it's trying to connect.
It's trying, and you've got this heat build up in there because you have resistance, and you get cheap receptacles.
Right.
Therefore, the next time you do it, it's not going to hold as tight.
Gotcha. And it gets worse.
It gets worse and worse. Now, that's just in what it's gripping. and by plugging it in. We hadn't even talked about the connections.
Yeah.
When you wire a receptacle, you've got 4 screws. No, actually, there's 5 screws on that receptacle.
Mm-hmm.
And some receptacles have these little stab locks on the back. They're little bitty holes that electricians can. Now, why are they there? They're there so you can use them, right? Mm-hmm. So why would I take the time, bend my wire, undo the screw, put it around the screw, and tighten the screw when I can just stab it in the back? Because you shouldn't do it that way. Why? True story. I got a call from a house out in on Baltusrol. Old customer. Ray, I can't get my receptacles in the bathroom to work. Well, darn. That house was built back in the late 70s. Copper wire, though. Did not have aluminum wire. I undid this receptacle, top screw, bottom screw, literally pulled it straight out, and it came, except for the ground screw, which was wrapped around the screw and tightened. That whole receptacle came straight out.
It was that loose.
All 4
wires.
Came right out of the back.
Wow.
All 4 came right out of the back. They were not screwed. They were in those little holes. Wonder what the problem was. Well, it's obvious. Okay, now, I have a policy that I told all my workers to this very day. You use the screws on a receptacle to make your connection. Do not use those holes in the back. Do not do it. And now here's the other thing. Why do people wrap the screws backwards? It goes clockwise. When you tighten the screw, it should tighten the wire. Now, if you wrap it counterclockwise as you tighten the screw, you throw the wire off the screw.
You're unwinding the wire.
You unwind it. And a lot of people will put that wire on backwards. No, you wrap it around clockwise, and then you tighten it.
It's like the plumbing tape.
Exactly. Yeah. These are little things, you know.
Well,
now, there's 2 colored screws. There's brass colored and silver colored. Well, why is that? The silver colored gets the white wire. That's your neutral. Mm-hmm. The brass color gets the black wire. That's the hot wire. Now, that's the way you should do it. Now, now there are codes for tightening the receptacle. They can't wobble. You've gone and inspected many a receptacle. They just kind of jiggle in the wall.
Yeah.
They shouldn't jiggle like that. You know. So, you know, these are some things that, and I'm glad Uncle Red taught. I take them for granted. You know, I just know this stuff, and as you do maybe, but these things are things you need to know. And when you go buy a receptacle, you can buy that 47-cent receptacle, and it's going to probably do you just fine for a year or 2.
Yeah.
But now you step up to $1.47 a piece or $2.50 a piece. I mean, you can spend some money on a receptacle just like a switch. Switches are the same way. You can buy a cheap switch, 15-amp switch. Most lighting circuits are, in fact, 15 amps. Mm-hmm. You know, because lighting today does not take a lot of current, typically. Now, there are exceptions to that, of course. But lighting now, with LED being what it is, takes very little current at all.
Yeah.
So a little old 15-amp switch, but there again, those switches have the little holes in the back, just like the receptacles. Don't use them.
Well, two things I want to say about that, too. Some of those cheap outlets that you're talking about, they also don't have, a lot of the plugs, they don't have tension on them. You ever put a plug in,
it'll fall out.
It won't fall out. So every time you click that on, you're getting that tension.
Exactly.
That's a fire hazard. And the other thing is, any of that stab lock stuff, I mean, at least with a screw, you can tighten it down. If it gets loose, you can tighten it down. You've got more control. If that stab lock's loose, it's loose and it's done. I mean, it's done. You can't increase the... You
can't fix that.
Yeah, you can't.
It's relaxed and you can't, no.
Well, you know, and you mentioned it, Uncle Red mentioned it, code. You know, code is the minimum standard of behavior.
The minimum
I always tell people, I said, you know, it's like the law and ethics. You know, there's some things that may not be against the law, but they're unethical. And I say, you know, building codes like that. The law's the minimum standards of
Sure.
behavior. Keep you out of jail, but
Right.
it might not keep you out of trouble with your wife or something. I mean, my wife hopes not. I mean, you cheat on your wife, it's not against the law. It's certainly against its ethics. You know
Sure,
what I mean?
Sure.
And it's the same thing with some building products. It's the minimum standard of
Sure.
behavior. But you should go a little bit above the minimum standard.
Well, it's just like
we should do a
yeah.
little better than just staying out of jail. We should, you know, be faithful
Well,
to
it's
our
just
wives.
like those stats. Can you
know.
can you use those little holes in the back of that device? Sure, you can.
But remember, it's the minimum. You can go above the minimum, and
you
sometimes the
should.
minimum is not. The minimum should be higher in a lot of cases.
That's right. So you know these, and I'm glad he brought it up because I'm gonna go right back to the dryer component though, dryer receptacles. When you're dealing with 30 amps, and a lot of people don't think about this, in that dryer cord, you plug it in, there's either 3 prongs or 4 prongs.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do a diagram. Like when you move into a new house, look
Yeah.
at your dryer. You might have to go buy a new cord and put it on your.
Or
Not
a
4 different
receptacle,
ones.
or a receptacle, because
Yeah.
see those receptacles when they relax, that tension on those contacts relax, you have a lot of resistance and a lot of heat.
Yeah.
A lot. I've taken dryer cords and you can literally see where they're burnt. They're
Yeah.
fried.
The old ones have the 3, you know.
Yeah.
And then there's about 3 different newer ones with 4 different.
Well, there's
combinations.
50 amp and 30 amps,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, it's but this is stuff that dryer receptacles can be really a big fire hazard
Gotcha.
because, like I said,
It's pulling a lot.
a dryer is like a
What's
big
up, Uncle Ray?
hair dryer. A clothes dryer is nothing but a monstrous hair
I'll
dryer.
let Ray know.
It's
Okay?
pulling
A heat element,
Alright,
heat
give me
element
1 second. I gotta let him know.
with
okay?
30 amps of energy going through that thing. Who is that? Uncle Red
Red.
again?
Yeah.
Oh, put him on.
Well, he has something to say about what we're
let's
talking
talk
about.
Yes, sir. You want to add? Hey! Yeah, because that was when there's an arc, it'll trip. Yeah, it was. Oh yeah, it was Chris Harrell at Arc Electric.